Hello, this is Love and welcome to the final part of the hepatitis B. And in this video, we will talk about the remaining part of the hepatitis. So let's learn some few points that the actually hepatitis B infection, usually the 90% infection are acute infection, and usually the acute infection resolves by itself. So usually or most of the acute infection resolves by itself, or you can say there is a spontaneous recovery of the patient. There will be a spontaneous recovery of patient. Yes, there will be symptom like there will be prodromal symptom, there can be the jaundice, but ultimately the patient will actually recover by spontaneously. There is no need of any kind of treatment in these patient. But in some patient of the acute, in some patient, very few, some patient of the acute, acute hepatitis B will actually have the fulminant hepatic failure. Fulminant means life-taking or life-threatening. So in some patient only there will be the life-threatening fulminant hepatic failure, and in these patient only the treatment is required. In these patient only the treatment is required. But in most of the cases of the acute, the treatment is not required. So whatever we saw in the pathophysiology, that was actually about the acute case, and usually in 90% of the acute case, they will actually resolve by itself. And most cases are acute. But in only some patients who are actually, I can say that they are having the bad luck patient. So like Panoti patient. So in that, those only who are having very bad luck, so in that patient only there will be fulminant hepatic failure, and only those patients will require treatment. But yes, some patient will go into the chronic hepatitis B. Some patient will go into the chronic hepatitis B. But the chronic hepatitis B are also two types. That in some of the chronic hepatitis B there will be no any problem. So there will be no any symptom, only the patient will act as a carrier. The patient will act as a carrier of the disease, but yes, they will actually transmit the disease. They can transmit the disease to other, but will remain as a carrier. There will be no any problem to that particular patient. But in a few patients of the chronic hepatitis B, they will actually have the liver cirrhosis. And in some patients, very unfortunately, can develop the hepatocellular carcinoma. In some patients, on some very unfortunate patient, they will develop hepatocellular carcinoma. So see, actually the problem is in the hepatitis B virus, but the incidence is very low of the hepatocellular carcinoma and the liver cirrhosis. Most of the patients resolve itself, but only few patients like the fulminant hepatic failure needs treatment. Like those patients who are actually chronic hepatitis B patient will actually require treatment. So this is the concept you have to know, that what type of patient will require treatment. Let's see the graph of the acute hepatitis. So basically in the patient of the acute hepatitis, this is actually weeks. So in the x-axis I have shown you the weeks, and the y-axis that is shown that is level in the blood. So let us suppose that within the 1 month, so this is 4 weeks, so 4 weeks means 1 month. So within 1 month, the antigen, so let's suppose this is the point of infection. Here the infection has happened. So here let's suppose there is an infection, and within the 1 month, what start to appear in the blood, that is HBsAg. I have said you that the surface antigen start first to appear in the blood. So this antigen start to appear in the blood, and they will actually reaches their maximum level at the 12 week, and their level substantially decreases at the 24 week. So this is the pattern of the surface antigen, that the surface antigen will start to appear in the blood in almost 4 weeks, or you can say within 1 week, but they will actually become more detectable within 4 weeks, or we can say within 1 month, and they will actually keep on increasing. Surface antigen will keep on increasing, and the level actually falls at the 24 week. The date is not exactly like this, but in average it is like this. So the surface antigen is the first antigen to appear in the blood, and just after the appearance of the surface antigen, an antibody will appear. So our antibody will appear, and basically this antibody will appear. So this antibody is basically known as core antibody. I mean antibody to core antigen. So this is anti-HBC. See, actually the HBCAG, this antigen will never appear in the blood. Remember that this antigen will never appear in the blood. But yes, the antibody against the HB core antigen will start to appear in the blood, and we will basically check the antibody against HBC is present or not. As I have already said you that this HBCAG, that is a core antigen, will not appear in the blood, will never appear in the blood. Okay, they will actually remain, these antigens will remain in the liver cells. They will not appear in the blood. Like the surface antigen actually appear in the blood, but this core antigen will actually go inside the liver cell and will not come reverse back into the blood. That is why the core antigen will not be seen in the blood, but the antibody to the core antigen will present in the blood, and initially it is actually the first antibody to appear, like the first antigen to appear against to appear for the hepatitis B is surface antigen. Similarly, the first antibody to appear against the hepatitis virus B is actually the core antigen. But this core antigen, the core antibody, but this core antibody will not provide any kind of immunity. So this is a actually core antibody to core antigen. But what is the main thing is that they will not provide protection. So they will not protection will not be provided by this. Will not be provided by this antibody. So this antibody will not basically provide protection. They will only help in the diagnosis of the disease. So yes, in the diagnosis of the disease, this antibody level can help, but they will not actually help in the protecting the body from the infection. Yes. So initially the antibody to the core antigen will be initially of the IgM type, and in the latter that will be of the IgG type. And now at this time only, basically the one more antigen start to appear in the blood. So this is weak, we already know, no need to write. So one more antigen start to appear in the blood, and I have said you that once the infection occur, so initially at first the surface antigen will get released, and just after the few weeks of the surface antigen is appeared in the, just after the few weeks of the surface antigen, there will be detectable level of the HBeAg and HBV DNA. So they will actually also start to detect at this time. So we can say that they will actually start to rise from this time, and they will actually go in the peak, and they will fall. So this HBeAg antigen and hepatitis B virus antigen, this both antigen, so this is HBeAg and HBV DNA. So this both antigen will actually start appear after the appearance of the HBsAg, and will actually the titer will fall before the HBsAg fall. So they will actually come later, and the level will will actually decrease sooner than the surface antigen level. So such type of the pattern will be of the hepatitis B antigen and the hepatitis B virus DNA. Now from the 24 to 28 weeks, there will only be the presence of the IgG type of antibody against the HBC, and in this period there will be no any kind of, in this period there will be no any kind of the antigen present in the blood, as the level of the surface antigen also get decreased. The level of the hepatitis E and hepatitis EAG and hepatitis B virus DNA will also get decreased. So in this period, basically there will be only presence of the IgG against the HBC. So the antibody against the HBC of the IgG type will only be present in the blood. There will be no any hepatitis B virus DNA. There will be no E antigen. There will be no any surface antigen. So this period is basically known as gap period. Gap period. Or we can say that this period is also known as window period. Gap period or window period. And in this time, the patient will actually have no symptom at all. And at this time the patient will not be infective. And if you will start to detect the surface antigen and or the these antigens, so they will not be appear in the blood, and you may actually misdiagnose the case. So that is why this antigen will also help in the diagnosis. Okay, so they will tell you that so only presence of the IgG antibody is telling that the patient is in the gap period. So let's again practice this, as this is so much volatile. So let's practice. So the first antigen that appears in the blood, this is surface antigen curve. And after the appearance of surface antigen, there will be the first antibody that will appear, but will not provide any protection in the body, but will help in the diagnosis of the disease. This antibody is antibody against HBC, and initially it will be of the IgM type, and later it will be of the IgG type. Okay, and then an antigen will appear, and this antigen is basically hepatitis B E antigen and hepatitis B virus DNA. Yes, their presence indicate that the virus is replicating and the person is infective. And in between the 24 to 28 week, there will be only presence of the IgG, of the anti-HBC. There will be no any level of the HBsAg or these antigens. So this period is known as gap period. Gap period. Now what happened, once the gap period is finished, there will be appearance of the antibody. So there will be the appearance of the antibody, and this antibody is actually anti-HBsAg. So this is the antibody against the surface antigen. This is the antibody against the surface antigen. And yes, this is the first antibody in the actually blood that is actually protective antibody. So this is actually antibody to surface antigen. So antibody to surface antigen. And yes, this is actually protective antigen. Protective antigen. This antigen will actually prevent you from the further infection, and will actually decrease the viral multiplication, and will decrease the viral load. So basically this antigen is actually protective antigen. So protective antigen start to appear in the blood after the 28 weeks. And once the actually antibody to the HBs or the antibody to the surface antigen start to appear in the blood, basically at this time the patient usually recovers. So the patient will actually recover at this stage. So the presence of the antibody to the surface antigen indicate that the patient is actually recovering, and the patient will not develop the liver cirrhosis or the hepatocellular carcinoma in future, if there is a presence of the antibody to the surface antigen. As the presence of the antibody to surface antigen indicates that the virus will now not replicate, the virus will not be able to grow inside the body. Let's study the difference in the graph between the acute and the chronic hepatitis. So in the acute hepatitis, the graph of the basically the surface antigen curve was like this. So it actually start to appear at the 4 week and end at the week of the 24. So at the 4 week it start to appear in the blood, and at the 24 week the level actually falls of the HBsAg. But in some patients, unfortunately in some patients, so this is actually acute hepatitis. This is actually acute hepatitis. But in some patients, what happen? Actually the level start to increase at the 4 week. But this level will not actually decrease. This level will not actually decrease, will keep on remain, or we can say that level will actually take a plateau, or we can say that this level will not fall. So if the HBsAg level is not falling, it is indicate that the disease is becoming chronic. So it indicate that the disease has become chronic. And the chronic infection, usually there will be presence of the HBsAg. And if the HBsAg is present, remember that there will be never presence of the antibody to HBs. So there will be always absence of anti-HBsAg. As if the antibody to HBsAg would have developed, then the disease would not have become chronic. So the absence of anti-HBsAg and the presence of the HBsAg indicates that the disease has become chronic. And yes, to support the diagnosis, also see that the IgG HBC is present or not. As we said that this IgG, usually the acute infection is supported by the IgM, as there was a second curve of the anti like this. So this second curve was actually of the anti-HBC. Initially it will be of the IgM type and later it will be IgG type. So presence of the IgG HBC and the presence of the HBsAg, IgG HBC and the presence of HBsAg indicates that the disease has become chronic. So it is a full diagnosis that the disease has become chronic. There is no any doubt now. And in such a patient, they will basically require the treatment. So they will basically require the treatment. And so we will see now that what are those conditions where the acute hepatitis will become chronic, and what kind of patient will be susceptible for the chronic hepatitis, and in what kind of patient we will do treatment. So before going to the further discussion, let's talk for a case. So let us suppose there is a 20-year male presented in the OPD with the complaints of the nausea for 7 days. There was also multiple episodes of vomiting, and the patient is usually a smoker, but nowadays he is having aversion to smoking, that he is not getting the pleasant taste of the smoke, or he is not actually having the pleasant smell of the smoke, and there is actually taste disturbance. He is not enjoying the food nowadays, and there is actually low grade fever in his body all the time, and there is actually the mild pain in the right upper quadrant of the abdomen, or we can say that patient is telling that sometimes he feels that discomfort in the right upper quadrant region, or we can say that, or the patient may tell you in the epigastric region. Now when I, as a doctor, when I examined the patient, on examination I found that the patient was icteric. So there was icterus present, and when I took the level of the serum bilirubin, it was actually greater than 2 mg%, or we can say 2 mg per deciliter. And when I examine her abdomen, so an examination of the abdomen, there was the tenderness in the right upper quadrant, and there was the hepatomegaly. Or we can say that there is actually the liver span is actually increased now. Then how will you diagnose this case? That the patient complain with you the nausea, vomiting, aversion to smoking, that he is not actually having the smell of the smoke, or there is a taste disturbance, there is a low grade fever, mild pain in the right upper quadrant, and on examination you find that the patient is icteric, that serum bilirubin is greater than 2 mg%, and on examination of the abdomen there is a tenderness present in the right upper quadrant, and there is a hepatomegaly, that the liver span is also increased. So actually, so there was too many differentials in my mind. The first differential was the food poisoning, so that the patient was having food poisoning or not. So I asked him that what food he take during these days. So the food pattern was usually normal. So I started to work up for I started to investigate for the patient, and I sent some lab investigation. So basically I sent the investigation, that is liver function test. So in liver function test, I sent the serum bilirubin, the SGOT, SGPT, and serum alkaline phosphate. SGPT, SGOT, and the serum bilirubin. Especially in this patient, when the report has arrived, it was actually serum bilirubin was greater than 2 mg%, and the bilirubin was basically the unconjugated. There was rise in the unconjugated bilirubin. The SGPT level was also SGOT level was increased, but the SGPT is more increased in comparison to the SGOT, and there was normal serum alkaline phosphatase. then what might be the diagnosis? So see, actually, as there is the increase in the unconjugated bilirubin and the SGPT has increased substantially, so we can say that this is a case of the hepatocellular jaundice. Hepatocellular jaundice. Why this is a case of hepatocellular jaundice? As there is actually the greater than 2 mg% the level of the serum bilirubin indicate the patient is having jaundice. And on examination also we found that the patient was icteric. And the SGPT is actually the liver enzyme, and that is actually specific for the liver. SGOT is present in heart also, but the SGPT is actually specific for the liver, and it is increased more in comparison to the SGOT. So the problem must be lying inside the inside the liver cells. That's why the SGPT is also increased, and that's why those disease type of, or we can say the damaged liver cells cannot conjugate the bilirubin, and that's why there is a rise in the rise in the unconjugated bilirubin, and that's why such a jaundice is known as hepatocellular jaundice. Let's see the difference. Let's see a difference between the different kind of jaundice. So let's suppose this is a serum bilirubin. This is a SGOT, SGPT, and serum alkaline phosphate. So in this patient there was increased unconjugated bilirubin. There was increased unconjugated bilirubin. There was increased SGOT, but there was more increased SGPT, and this was normal. So I said you that this is a patient of the hepatocellular jaundice. This is a patient of the hepatocellular jaundice. But if in case if there will be increase in the serum bilirubin, but that will be in the conjugated bilirubin, and if there will be normal SGOT, normal SGPT, and let's suppose there is a 4 times increased value of the serum alkaline phosphatase, then the patient will be of the obstructive jaundice. As in the obstructive jaundice, initially the liver cells will not get affected. In obstructive jaundice, as the bilirubin is actually conjugating, but they are not allowed to pass from the liver. That is why these liver cells, so that is why the conjugated bilirubin level is increased, and as there is no problem in the liver cells, that is why the SGOT and the SGPT, these are the liver enzymes, so their values are actually normal. But the serum alkaline phosphatase, the value of the serum alkaline phosphate increase usually when there is a biliary obstruction. So usually in the biliary duct, the serum alkaline phosphate is found. The serum alkaline phosphate is found in the biliary duct. So serum alkaline phosphatase is found in the biliary duct. That's why whenever if there is a problem in the biliary duct or any kind of obstruction, there will be increase in the level of serum alkaline phosphatase. And this report is showing that the patient is of the obstructive jaundice. So there might be any obstruction due to usually the obstruction occur due to any stone present in the biliary tract or different thing. And if the condition will be like this, there will be increased level of the unconjugated bilirubin, but there will be normal SGOT, normal SGPT, and the normal serum alkaline phosphatase. It means that the problem is nothing with the liver. So the liver is okay, the biliary tract is okay, as this both denoting the liver cells, and this test is denoting the biliary tract. And the 3 things are normal. It means there is a normal liver cell and there is a normal biliary tract. But there is increased unconjugated bilirubin. It means that there is more hemolysis, and such kind of jaundice is known as hemolytic jaundice. So this report is showing the hemolytic jaundice. So just this I have shown you this much only to make sure that in this case there is actually the hepatocellular jaundice. So on the investigation, I found that the patient is having the hepatocellular jaundice. Then I thought that what might be the reason for the hepatocellular jaundice? So the main reason is actually hepatitis B, or we can say different form of hepatitis. So I sent the specific investigation now for the hepatitis. So the specific investigation, I sent the level of the HBsAg, antibody anti-HBC, HBeAg, HBV DNA, So I sent these reports, and I also want to see the level of the anti-HBs Ag is present or not. So I found out that in this patient the report was like this. The HBs Ag was positive. The anti-HBC was IgM type. It is also present. Positive means that this antigen is present. So if this is present, it is very known that this will be absent. So this was actually absent in this patient, and there was the presence of the HBeAg and HBV DNA also. So this was also present. So if these three things are present, it indicates that the patient is having acute hepatitis. Patient is having acute hepatitis, as there was HBeAg, HBV DNA, and hepatitis surface antigen, and presence of the IgM indicate the infection is acute, and the presence of the HBeAg or HBV DNA is also indicating that the patient is in acute condition. But sometimes what happen, usually these two things may not be given in your exam, and only on the basis of these two you can say that the virus that the infection is acute. The presence of the IgM antibody, as the IgM will be present only in the acute cases, will not be present in the chronic cases, and the presence of HBsAg is indicating that the patient is having the infection. And usually if the infection is present, there will be no anti-HBs antibody in the. To be more sure, to be more confirm case, I have also sent the investigation for the ultrasonography, and in the ultrasonography I have seen that there was the hepatomegaly. There was the hepatomegaly. So presence of hepatomegaly is actually good or not? So there you should know that the presence of hepatomegaly indicates that there is actually good prognosis. So presence of hepatomegaly indicates there is a good prognosis, as if the liver start to shrunken down or the liver span actually decreases, it indicates that the liver is getting cirrhosed or the liver is going into the cirrhosis. But if the liver is enlarging, it means that the liver is only having the inflammatory reaction, it is not going into the cirrhosis. That's why if there is a hepatomegaly, it indicates there is a good prognosis, the patient will be fine in few days. So now once investigation is done, we saw the clinical, we have done the clinical examination, we have done the investigation, and now whether we should start the treatment in this case or not. As I have already said you that most of the cases recover itself. So most of the cases recover spontaneously. So whether we should give treatment or not. So this whether to give treatment or not, this depend upon the level of the hepatitis B virus DNA or HBeAg. So the actually quantitative value of the hepatitis B virus DNA and HBeAg will tell us that we should do treatment or not. If so the quantitative test of the hepatitis B virus DNA is done by the PCR. So PCR machine will tell you the value of the HBV DNA, and yes, if there is a HBe positive, if there is a HBe positive, then if the HBV DNA level, if it's greater than 20,000 intra-units per ml, if the level of the hepatitis B virus DNA is greater than 20,000 intra-units per ml, then we will actually do the treatment. Then we will do treatment, or we can say we will start treatment. And what treatment we will do, I will tell you later. And if there is a value less than 20,000, then no treatment. Only there can be the conservative management can be done. So there can be conservative management. So what is conservative management? So if there is a nausea, you should treat nausea. If there is a vomiting, give him antiemetic drug. If there is a dehydration, give him the IV fluids. But only the conservative treatment is required if their value is less than 20,000 intra-units per ml. But if there is actually HBeAg is negative, or we can say that the level of the HBeAg is decreased, but in this case, if there is a hepatitis B virus DNA is present, then the value if it is only greater than 2000 introns per ml, then also you should start the treatment. So if there is a HBeAg negative, or we can say there is absence of the HBeAg, but if there is HBV DNA is present, then you should actually start the treatment only if there is a greater than 2000 introns per ml. And I have said you that usually whenever the HBeAg is produced, in that time only, I mean whenever the HBeAg start to appear in the blood, in that time only the HBV DNA also appear in the blood. But I am now telling that the HBV DNA is present, but the HBeAg is absent. Yes, it happen only in one kind of the patient. So remember, in the first in the beginning of the video, I have said you there was a mutant of the virus. There was known as precore mutant. There was a mutant person in the virus. There was precore mutant virus, and this precore mutant is a variant of the hepatitis B virus. So this variant will actually do not secrete the HBeAg in blood, and such kind of virus will found in the European regions. So in the European regions, the HBeAg will not appear in the blood, will not be excreted by this precore mutant virus, and in that case we should actually give treatment on the basis of HBV DNA only. And in that case, only greater than 2000 intra-units per ml, the level of HBV DNA is actually so greater than this much, we will start the treatment. So this is a concept that you should know. Now let's talk the different scenario. Let us talk that different condition where this. So usually in the exam, the examiner will give you the pattern of like this, and you will get confused in this type of question. HBeAg. So imagine a patient in which there is a positive HBsAg. It means the surface antigen is present, and if the surface antigen is present, there will be always absence of the antibody to HBs. So anti-HBs is absent, and there is an antibody to HBc, but this is of IgM type, and there will be presence of also HBeAg. And if HBeAg is present, usually there will be presence of HBV DNA also. So this is also present. So this indicate that the infection is acute hepatitis. Okay. Now let us suppose a case in which there is actually a presence of the HBsAg, and if HBsAg is present, it is always absent. This security system is absent. This anti-HBs is a security system or protective system. If the antigen is present, it means there is no at this time there is no actually appearance of the protective system or antibody to the HBs, and as IgG type antibody is present, and there is actually presence of the HBeAg and HBV DNA. Then what does it indicate? Presence of the surface antigen and presence of the IgG. So presence of IgG indicates that the infection is now not acute, it has become chronic. But presence of the HBeAg, it is indicating that the infection is chronic, but patient is still highly infectious, as there is a presence of HBeAg. So patient is highly infectious. Let us suppose the patient has absent HBsAg, present HBsAg, anti-HBs. So this HBsAg is absent, but the antibody is present, and this is now the IgG type, and there is no HBeAg also. So this indicates that security system has come on. Security system has come now, and if the antibody to HBs has come, it indicates that the body is now under protection. And if there will be protection, then there will be no any kind of the surface antigen, and there will be no any kind of the viral replication. That's why this is also negative. So it indicates that the patient is going on the recovery phase. And let's suppose if there is a condition where there is a negative HBsAg, but there will be positive antibody, and there will be actually negative, there will be negative anti-HBC also, and there will be negative this also. So there is only one thing present, that is antibody to HBs. It means that the person is never infected, but yes, he has taken the vaccination. He has taken the vaccination, and if you have taken the vaccination, the antibody to HBs, the security system or the protective system has developed, but all things are not present. And let's suppose a condition where the HBsAg is negative, antibody to HBsAg is also negative. Only if the thing is present, that is IgG type of the antibody is present, and this is also negative. So I have said you in the graph, you have already studied that in the graph there was like this and there was like this. So this was the time where there was only the presence of the IgG. So this time was, I have said you, this was actually gap period, and in the gap period there will be no IgG, no in the gap period there was actually no any surface antigen, no any hepatitis E antigen or the viral B DNA, and in the gap period only one thing that is present, that is IgG. So see this condition, there is nothing present, only IgG is present, so it indicates the patient is in the gap period. Patient is in the gap period. And yes, sometimes the patient may not be in the gap period, sometimes the patient will be like they are only carrier, but the carrier are like the low level carrier, so there will be no any detectable level of the surface antigen. Summarize what we have studied. So in the clinical feature we talked that usually in the acute hepatitis most of the patient remain asymptomatic, that the most of the patient will actually asymptomatic. Most of the patient will either, if they were having symptom also, they will actually recover itself. There is no any treatment is required. But what are the symptoms? I said you the symptoms was like the nausea, vomiting, anorexia means loss of appetite. There was a low grade fever, and there can be the myalgia. Myalgia means the generalized body ache. There can be the fatigability. There is a patient become fatigued in very less work, and there can be the pain in right upper quadrant, or we can say there is a pain in the epigastric region. And yes, there can be the if the patient is smoking, then you will not feel any smell of smoke, and there can be the taste disturbance. And I said you that these symptoms are known as prodromal symptoms. As they are not specific to a particular disease, this symptom can be presented in many conditions. And at last, in the very latter, the patient will develop the jaundice. That the patient will become icteric. And once the jaundice develop, later the patient will recover, and there is no any kind of treatment is required. And for the diagnosis, I said you to do the following investigation like HBsAg. So in the blood, what you can do in the blood investigation, you can go for the HBsAg. You can do the HBeAg. You can do the antibody anti-HBc. So you can check that is IgM or IgG. It will help you to see the infection is acute or the chronic. And you can also do the ultrasonography. You can go for the basically liver function test. So you can do the liver function test. So in liver function test, you will do actually the serum bilirubin, the serum alkaline phosphatase, to see the obstructive jaundice is present or not. So this serum alkaline phosphatase to rule out obstructive jaundice. And serum ALT, or we can say SGPT. So SGPT is present or not. So basically the level of SGPT, usually if it is greater than 20 intra-units per liter in female, and if it is greater than 30 intra-units per liter in male. So this indicates that the level has increased. And basically you will also do some more investigation, like you will do the serum albumin. So this serum albumin is especially done if we suspect the patient is getting cirrhosed or not. So to rule out cirrhosis, as if the liver has cirrhosed, the synthetic function of the liver will get decreased, and if the synthetic function, the protein making function of the liver will get decreased, then the serum albumin level will also decrease. So in the acute cases, the serum albumin level will be normal, but in the cirrhosis, but if there is a cirrhosis, then there will be decreased serum albumin level. And yes, the USG can be USG can help us to see there is a presence of the hepatocellular carcinoma or not. So to rule out hepatocellular carcinoma, and also to see there is a hepatomegaly or not. So these two things are basically seen, and we will also see the complete blood count, as in the cirrhosis. What happened in the cirrhosis patient? Usually there will be the portal hypertension, and if there will be portal hypertension, there will be splenomegaly. And if there is splenomegaly, basically there will be increased destruction of the platelets. And if there will be increased destruction of platelet, the platelet count will decrease. The platelet count in the blood will get decreased. So to see the platelet count has decreased or not, so to rule out the cirrhosis, we will also do the CBC, that is complete blood count. So there are some risk factor, and if these risk factors are present, then it is very there is more chance that the patient will develop the chronic hepatitis. So what are those risk factors? So if there will be persistent high level of the hepatitis B virus DNA, persistently high, if the level of the hepatitis B virus DNA is persistently high, that is greater than 2000 intra-units per ml, then we will actually say that the patient patient may have more risk of the chronic hepatitis. Or if there is a persistently high ALT level, that is SGPT level, so ALT or SGPT is same thing. So if there is a persistently high SGPT level, then like if there is a greater than 20 intra-units per ml in female, and if the level is greater than 30 intra-units per ml in male, then the patient will develop the chronic hepatitis. Or if there is a co-infection with the hepatitis C, so if there is a patient is already hepatitis B infection, and now the patient is infected with the hepatitis C virus, then in that case the patient will have more chance to develop the chronic hepatitis. And if the patient is alcoholic, then there is a more risk. If the patient has presence of alpha fetoprotein in the blood, so presence of alpha fetoprotein in the blood indicates the patient is in the more risk to develop chronic hepatitis B. And if there is a family history of hepatic cellular carcinoma, or if the patient is elderly, then also there will be more chance of chronic hepatitis to develop. Let's talk some point about the chronic hepatitis. So chronic hepatitis B. So chronic hepatitis B will occur if there will be risk factor. So I have already discussed about the risk factor. And how to diagnose the chronic hepatitis B? There should be the presence of HBsAg greater than 6 months. So if HBsAg is present greater than 6 months, and if there will be IgG type of anti-HBC, the presence of these two indicate that the patient is having the chronic hepatitis B. And if there is a chronic hepatitis B, it's not necessary that we will start a treatment. So we will start treatment only after seeing the viral load. So we will see that HBV DNA load. So if the HBV DNA load is actually greater than 20,000 intra-unit per ml, and plus there should be actually increased level of the SGPT greater than 2 times. So if there will be increased level of SGPT greater than 2 times, and if there will be level of the HBV DNA is greater than 20,000 intra-unit per liter, then you will start the treatment. But if the level is decreased than this, then there is no need to treat this condition also. There is one question that why cirrhosis develop in the chronic hepatitis B patient. So chronic hepatitis B, why the cirrhosis develop? The simple reason is that the cells are being damaged for the more time. So there is a HBsAg present, so it indicates that the patient is having infection, and if it is persistently high for a longer period of time, so it is damaging cells. And damaging cells mean the hepatocytes are being continuously damaged for a longer period of time, and as there is a continuous damage of the hepatocytes for a longer period of time, then the stellate cells, so this stellate cells is actually present in the hepatocytes. These stellate cells are actually present in between the liver cells and the biliary sinusoids. So in between the liver cells and the biliary sinusoid, there are some important cells, or they are known as itocells, or they are known as stellate cells. So these itocells or stellate cells start to do fibrosis. So they will actually cause fibrosis, and due to the continuous fibrosis, ultimately they will develop the cirrhosis. So let's summarize the treatment pattern. If the HbE-AZ value is positive and HbV DNA value is greater than 20,000 intra-unit per ml, then treatment should be started. But if HbE is negative but HbV is greater than HbV DNA is greater than 2000 intra-unit per ml, then also start the treatment. HbVE negative will be seen in that case of the precore mutant virus. And if there is presence of cirrhosis, or if there is a presence of hepatocellular carcinoma, then also you should start the treatment. So in any condition, if these things are present, you should start the treatment. Otherwise, there is no need of treatment. And yes, one more thing, the SGPT level should be greater than 2 times of the normal value. So this is also one of the indication that in addition to the greater HbV DNA presence, there should also be the greater SGPT value greater than 2 times. Then we will start the treatment. So what is the treatment that is given for the hepatitis B virus? So the treatment is basically, in the previous days, there was a drug used that is known as interferon. So basically there was a drug used known as interferon. So that is alpha interferon. So in the previous days, alpha interferon was used. But basically the alpha interferon was not killing the virus. This drug was actually the immune booster. So we can say that like the immune booster is using nowadays for the corona patients. So immune booster is used previously. There was no any drug to kill the virus that time. So this immune booster drug was given in the form of injection, and this should be taken 3 times per week. So in a week the patient has to take 3 times injection, and the main drawback of this drug was about the compliance, that to come 3 times to the hospital to take the drug, so it is not somehow practical. So there was problem in the compliance. So the compliance problem was main problem in the case of this drug. But nowadays the newer drugs came, those are the virocytic drug. So virocytic drug means these drugs will actually kill the virus and decrease the viral load. Actually, see, there is no any type of the total cure of this disease, but yes, the viral load can be decreased, the problem severity can be decreased. So the virocytic agents are basically the tenofovir and entecavir. So there are 2 drugs, one is tenofovir and another is entecavir. So these 2 drugs are usually taken, and the dose of the entecavir is basically 0.5 to 1 mg once a day orally. So there was very good thing that these drugs were taken orally. So there was no any problem in the compliance. So the compliance was good. And after the treatment, basically we will talk about the prevention. So prevention is simply, I have talked already about the prevention, like the prevention to those patients who are actually pregnant. So pregnant patient, and if they are having the baby, So they will ask you that what they should do in order to avoid the chance of or decrease the chance of infection to their baby. So in these cases, usually you should give the vaccination, like you should give the immunoglobulins. So once the baby is born, so within 24 hours, so we can say within 6 to 12 hours, you will give the immunoglobulins plus hepatitis V vaccination to the baby. So after delivery, within 6 to 12 hours, you will give the immunoglobulins against the virus, and you will also give the hepatitis B vaccination to the baby. So this immunoglobulin will provide the passive immunity, and this hepatitis B vaccination will provide the active immunity. That whatever the virus the baby get from the mother, that will be actually neutralized by the immunoglobulins, and the baby can be infected with the virus in the later stages of life. So for that, the active immunity will work, and due to which the hepatitis vaccination is also given. And basically, it should be taken at the 0 day, 6 week. The second day is taken at the 6 week, and the third dose is taken at the 10 week. So in this way, 3 doses are of the active vaccination is given. But the dose of immunoglobulin in the baby, is actually 200 intra-units. So 200 intra-units of the dose of immunoglobulin is given to the baby, for the baby. But what dose we should give to the those doctors or those internists or those practitioners who get the accidental needle injury by the positive syringe of the hepatitis B virus. So in that cases, similarly they will be also given the immunoglobulins. I have already discussed this thing, just I am repeating those things. So immunoglobulin and vaccination. But the baby will get the dose of 200 intra-units, but this person will get the dose of 500 intra-units. So this adult person who actually get the accidental needle injury will get actually 500 intra-units immunoglobulin.